They got a hold of an organization we belong to down here in the metropolitan D.C. area, the Maine State Society. It's a social group that most states have a social group, and they asked for some help. And Morrill said that he says I was there in 1992, but I can't find anything for sure that says I was. My name's not on a piece of paper or in a photograph or anything I could find. And but from '93 on, I was there to unload boxes of wreaths and start to put them down. We had a gentleman from the society who was kind of the coordinator, just contacting Arlington to make an arrangement of what section they want us to cover and things like that. And he had done that from '92 to 2005.
Wow.
And in 2005, he kind of said, well, he was getting tired or getting old, and somebody else had to step up. So Wayne stepped up, and I took over as the coordinator for the society with Arlington. And that was the same year that that iconic picture was taken of by an Air Force photographer who happened to be one of the volunteers, because Morrill had never sent or looked for any publicity for what he was doing. It was just his personal tribute to the veterans. And at that time, the internet was available, and he put that on the internet. And that was the same year that I took over as the coordinator. And that's when everything hit the fan, and people started saying that was all fake, that they would have heard about this. They said it was false news and everything. And they started checking and finding out that no, he had been doing that all those years. And the following year, where they had coverage from Japan and all over the world, sent people down to Arlington on Wreath Day to see that this was actually happening. And when it became newsworthy, people said, gee, we want to help Morrill remember the veterans. So they started sending him money and saying, hey, we want to help. How can we help? And Morrill, again, wasn't a 501c3 organization. He was in the profit business. So he actually had to hire somebody to track the funding wherever possible and return it wherever possible. And
because he wasn't, and he at this point, he had never thought about making a nonprofit. He was just like,
never,
this is just what I'm doing.
His personal tribute. So his family got together when these people across the country started saying, we want to help. And they said, hey, if there's people out there that want to help us remember the veterans and honor them, let's put in for 501c3. So the family got together, his wife, Karen, and his kids got together, and they put in the paperwork in 2006. And we were approved in 2007, and that's the birth of the organization known as Wreaths Across America in 2007.
Interesting. So, of course, we could see what Wreath does at Arlington every December.
Yes.
What else does the organization do? Is it just Arlington now, or now you guys are?
Yeah. We started with Arlington, that one location. When we were formed as a 501c3, we increased it to a couple hundred locations. We wanted to do the national cemeteries and state veteran cemeteries where we could. We needed to have a coordinator who would agree to holding a ceremony and things like that. But we've grown from that one location back in 2000, or really 1992. Last year we had over 1,700 locations.
Wow.
All across the country. And
so this is going beyond national cemeteries, state cemeteries.
Yes.
Wow.
We have any place that has veterans and has a person who will be what we call a location coordinator holding a ceremony on Wreath Day. Wreath Day is always the same all across the country, with a few exceptions. Like at West Point, they do them a little bit earlier because of the cadets leave for the holidays and like that. But we try to have a ceremony, and we try to coordinate our ceremonies that we say, start your ceremony wherever you are, start it at noontime Eastern time, because that's the time that we are completing our work at Arlington, because we start earlier at Arlington and we end our ceremony day at Arlington at the Tomb of the Unknowns, placing a special wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns at noontime. And we figure what we're requesting our other coordinators do, if they start their ceremonies around that same time, basically all across the country, we have a moment of silence and appreciation for our veterans going on at the same time.
Interesting. So it's a coordinated moment of silence.
Yes.
Very good. Wayne, why after retirement, and you've been doing this a long time after your retirement, why is it important for you, and why is it important for other veterans to serve organizations like Wreaths Across America after their military service?
I'll tell you a story that happened back in 2013.
Okay.
Up to that period of time, we weren't able to cover all of Arlington. We didn't have enough sponsorships to help us. We rely on individual sponsorships and some corporate donations. We get no government funding. But in 2013, my wife and I do what we call special requests, where someone last year, we'll say Section 52 was covered. The cemetery officials would assign us different sections in the cemetery that they wanted covered each year because we weren't able to cover the whole cemetery. So they moved us around. And we'll say that Section 52 was covered last year, so it wasn't scheduled to be covered this year in 2013. But we have somebody that lives out in California or Washington State, and they say, hey, my husband's buried in Section 52, and I know that 52 was covered last year, but I've sponsored a couple of wreaths, and I want to make sure my husband gets a wreath. Would you do that special request for us? So my wife and I go in after Wreath Day and spend the next few days doing these special requests.
Oh, wow.
And I was carrying a wreath into a section that wasn't supposed to be covered, but had 50 or 60 wreaths scattered in this big section. And as I'm walking by, there's a gentleman standing in the cemetery because it's holidays and many people visit Arlington. And as I walked by him, he stopped me and said, excuse me, he says, what are all these wreaths? And he's looking across the street and sees the section next to it, they're completely covered. And these few scattered in the section he's standing in. So I proudly tell him about Wreaths Across America, and we're there to remember, honor, and teach, and to thank the service members for their service and sacrifice. And he said 4 words to me that keep me going every day now. And he says, what about my son? And he happened to be standing in front of his son's marker, and it just so happened that the line coming up to where his son's marker was, there was 4 or 5 wreaths in a row, and it ended, and his son didn't have a wreath. And it really hit me hard, and it does today. Every time I think about it, I tear up a little, because I said, geez, how many other people come to Arlington? And as a coordinator, that's the one I was concerned with most, is how many come to Arlington when that last wreath is placed, and their loved one, their mother, father, sister, brother, aunt, and uncle, whatever, doesn't have a wreath. And fortunately, we had an extra one that we gave him, so he had one. But I made a promise to myself right then. I said, I've got to do whatever I can to make sure we cover Arlington. But then this year we'll have close to 1,800 locations, and all of those don't get filled.
Yeah.
And we don't want to forget our veterans. The old saying, you die twice. You die once when your heart stops beating and you take that final breath, but you die a final time when your name is spoken by somebody for the last time, and then you're forgotten.
Yeah.
And we don't want to forget our veterans. That's why we tell our volunteers at all of our locations, when you place that wreath, say that name out loud so they're not forgotten. Thank them for their service and sacrifice, but say the name. And that's what we need people to come in and help us, the volunteers and the veterans, to realize that, hey, these guys and ladies have died either in service or after their service, protecting the freedoms that we have. And that's why we want to teach the kids. We tell the kids, hey, when you place that wreath down, take down a name. We've got the internet now and Google. You can Google that person. Find out about them, learn a little bit about them. I call Arlington a library, because behind every stone there's a story. Learn that story, pass it on to somebody.